Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Rise Urban Nation. And you know we can't do an episode without speaking to Shola. So I brought her back specifically for one reason only, because ever since we released that article of founders you should be on the lookout for, a lot of people didn't know about Hygear. So I did Shola. You don't have to tell them about Hygear now, because I don't know why I thought we talked about Hygear at some point, but for some reason we didn't, because people were like, wait, she has another company? Like, what is this Hygear? How did this come to be? And so
Oh
let's take it back. Like, we knew about more media and all other stuff, but let's talk about Hygear, because I don't even know if I know the full story. Like, how did Hygear begin? Who's involved? Tell us about this wonderful thing that you've created.
I'll be happy to. I'll be happy to. Thank you so much for having me again. And it's always a pleasure, like being on the podcast with you. But High Gear has been, something we've been working on for past couple of years, and we're in stealth mode essentially because we're working on our patents. And
Hmm.
now, we're coming up for air because we're getting to a point where we are about to commercialize one of them. So
Hmm.
yeah, so just let me give you guys a brief story. High Gear Technologies is a hygiene tech company, and it's focused on research, development, distribution, marketing, and education of disinfection technology. And currently, we're developing and working on UVC disinfection tech and products. And we also partnered with UVC disinfection companies that from Europe that are trying to basically introduce their products around the world.
Hmm.
And a little story on how it came about. In 2019, three women, during, it was actually Thanksgiving, we sat together and we were thinking, we're all at a point in our lives that we want to do something intentional, something that's going to make a real impact. In my space, I work with entrepreneurs, trying to encourage, ethnic minorities to take on entrepreneurship, because I believe it's a vehicle for real economic change. Another who was an educator, former educator, had been one, for almost over 20 years. And the thing that she had noticed was that the best point to really work with students was basically in fifth grade. And this is someone who can
Hmm.
literally run a university or run a school. She has those credentials. And the
Yeah.
third of us, had obviously worked in government in Africa, and then has seen everything from lower class all the way to upper class, the challenges and issues that are going on the continent. So the three of us were like, we're all from Africa. We wanted to figure out what we could do. We wanted to figure out how we could create technology that the world could also benefit from. And we came up with, one common thing that was across board, which was hygiene. Like, and one of the things that the reasons why it was a funny chat, because one of us, the one in education, was like, look, that every time I go back to school, she always gets sick, and that she can't really, she's always like trying to maintain a certain level of professional distance from the kids, obviously, but even more because of, hygiene and all that kind of stuff, which was funny at the time when she was talking about it, but it made sense, right? Like every household knows the moment school gets back in session, you're catching some kind of bug. Now, at the time, you remember that was 2019, and this was before COVID-19 hit. So we were already
Hmm.
working on researching technologies that would be viable, obviously, in communities that did not have access, to this kind of what's it called, products. And one of the key things with a lot of these communities is that they are usually off grid. They're very rural. Even some urban areas, of course, as you know, in Africa, still suffer from lack of electricity or consistent electricity. A lot of the homes back home, they tend to, they basically power their own house. They power their own house. They provide
Yeah.
themselves their own water from the well, and so many other things. And another thing about the technology we're working on, it's focus. It basically can help disinfect water surfaces and air. But with Africa, the main focus is always on water, because access to water is an issue. But access to water is not where it only stops. It's also the sanitation and disinfection of water as
Hmm.
well. But that's difficult because in the West, you guys have infrastructure, systems that are powered by electricity continuously that clean and cleanse and purify your water, right?
Yeah.
But that's not the case there. We have independent, every home has a suckaway, every home has a well that they're pumping water from, every home has a generator that powers the house, very self sustaining, literally off grid living, right? And
Mhm.
but in cities, in a cityscape kind of situation. So me growing up there, like I grew up in Nigeria up until I was 14, and being upper middle class, it didn't register in my mind until I remember the first time when I was living with family in England when I moved back to the UK. And they just went to the tap and took water from the tap. I think I stared at my aunt for at least 20 minutes at every time she kept on doing that. Because that's not how it's that's not how we do it back home. No, once we pump water, which is usually once or twice a day because of the electricity,
Uh,
it goes into a massive pot to boil. Once it's boiled and cooled, and this is what the maid literally has to do every single day, usually twice a day. And she has to pour it into this filter, this stainless steel filter that has like minerals and stones or whatever in there. And then once that's filtered, she puts it in bottles, she puts it in certain vials so that it will be used for cooking, cleaning and things like that. Then,
mhm.
if we're going to have a bath, not shower, bath, where we literally put water in a bucket and then scoop it and pour it on ourselves, we need to put Dettol into that water. So that's how I grew up, literally. So a lot of people were like, oh my goodness, Africans have like really clean skin. I said, man, we disinfect our water before we put it on our skin, and that's standard. Right, even like to wash a baby, everything. I remember when I went for a job back in Nigeria when I still had my consultancy in the UK, and it was the most strenuous thing was the water she was going to drink and she was going to bathe with. We never took water from the tap. If we did, it would have to be disinfected, right? And then it depends depending on where you live. Some people had like some water purification system, but again, if you don't have constant electricity or electricity is unstable, those infrastructure you tend to get damaged quite quickly. So
Mm.
there are a lot of things that I looked at based on my experiencing. My mom, being a diplomat's daughter, didn't had lived in different parts of the world. However, she was actually born in Nigeria, so she was able to tell me how they actually used to get water in the villages and things like that. That when they used to
Mhm.
visit, and I just found it like really odd that like Nigeria is really weird because there's like you have super rich and you have super poor.
Yeah.
However, the way we do things in terms of getting food, getting water is kind of similar, right?
Mhm.
So you can't really say you can't. It's like for the West, it would be like we're our infrastructure is like a poverty infrastructure, right?
Mhm.
So hygiene is not something that we have to teach one another, like personal hygiene, because that's what people always think whenever they hear hygiene tech company. They automatically assume personal. I said, no, 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 we're going down to things like water, surfaces and air. Obviously, with COVID hitting, we now saw that there was an opportunity to work with air because
Yeah.
we found obviously it was determined how the pathogen was passed around, and air purification was a major thing, and it's still a major thing anyway now in mitigating the risk of passing COVID-19. Now we've
Mhm.
gotten to a stage where it's like an endemic, right? We're always
Mm.
going to be dealing with this consistently. So we're going to have to get vaccinated on a regular basis and all of that. But there's still a massive population in the world that hasn't done that, right?
Mhm.
So it's about figuring out how to balance what we were working on in terms of our pattern and what we could do also, again, in addition, in the hygiene space. Now, because we realized that, which took us a minute, that research
Mhm.
is going to take a while. It's not like we apply for a patent, we start making the product and sell it. No, 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 no. We're a life sciences company.
Mm.
It could take about 3 years pre-revenue. And for me, as an entrepreneur, I'm like, man, no, I can't wait for that. I can't wait for us to generate revenue in 3 years or something like that. We need to figure out what we can do now. So we branched and pivoted and opened a distribution division, right, and marketing
Mhm.
division, and that meant that we could partner with companies we could potentially even work in the future with, and
Mhm.
help them introduce their products into the US market, Africa, and the Middle East, which is
Mhm.
something that we worked a lot on last year. Then another thing we found, because distribution and marketing was, a bit challenging, right, was that a lot of people didn't understand the technology. And that was quite surprising for us because this UVC has been around for 100 years, right?
Yeah.
It's used currently here, in the US to
In
disinfect
the
water.
hospitals, right?
Yeah, in the hospitals as well, disinfect spaces with a robot. Those like Sputnik robots from looking
Yeah.
like robots from Doctor Who. Yeah, and I was completely um dazed at the fact that most times we'll have to educate people about it. And then when you say UVC, people hear UV thinking is dangerous stuff from the sun. Yes, UVC is part of the light spectrum and all of that, but there's specific wavelength that actually disinfects and depending on the exposure will sanitize, and that's
Hmm.
between 222 and 290, but 200 and 290 nm. But the major one people know about is between 250 and 280, and that can be dangerous if it's exposed to human skin and eyes. So
Mm.
it was really hard to try and navigate and get everybody on the same page to understand that this is what the technology is, and this is how it works. And it's hard for people to perceive that light can disinfect, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that we felt that, oh, you know what, there's an opportunity here, we need to educate, right? So the more and more things were coming up, we realized that in order to do this, it will be super hard to do it in a for-profit organization. So that
Hmm.
led us to start having discussions on multiple fronts globally on the benefit of our technology, keying into the non-profit space, right? And that was something that just happened last year for us. So
Nice.
it is 2022. We started in 2019, and we decided that what, we're going to basically set up a non-for-profit which is what we're calling keeping it clean, and we've actually registered it. We're in the process of getting our what's it called, charity status, which we're really excited about. One thing we've noticed is that one thing we're big about, as you know, Terrell, well, I'm big about, and then it's part of the fabric of Hygear, collaboration, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of things a lot of people don't realize when they're sitting on a pattern is that if you can't basically generate revenue from your, like, create the product or something yourself, the best thing to do is to collaborate with someone else
Hmm.
that might need it to basically up their own game, right? And in the
Ah.
industry we're in, we noticed, yeah, that they were quite comfortable in the water and in the healthcare space, but there's so much more they can do in other parts of the world.
Mhm.
But basically, essentially, that's like the story of High Gear. I think I've said a lot. Let me let Tyrell
Let
like jump in.
I love all of this,
Question.
and one thing I'm thinking about as you were telling the story about how light can disinfect. I remember when we were like middle of pandemic, and well, actually that was probably beginning of pandemic when people were making the mask and the homemade mask and so forth when they had the mask shortage, and then somebody was telling me like, hey, you could disinfect your mask by leaving it in the sun in your car, and it'll disinfect some of the COVID-19 product. I was like, wait, what? Is that for real? And then I
Mm,
remember looking it up, and then somebody saw somebody else that said that too. And so I was like, wow, this is amazing. The power of light, of what light
mm,
and UV light can do.
mm,
Um,
mm,
I love the fact that you guys are moving into the nonprofit space. I remember you guys doing the Hygear doing the sponsor a teacher campaign. One thing that's on my mind, and I want you to talk about the sponsor a teacher campaign, is I
mm,
know in New York just had a mandate. Well, no, they just New York is going through a phase right now where all the kids are coming back to school, but we still have this issue with the younger kids who can't get the vaccine yet, 5 years and younger, and a lot of the teachers saying, "Hey, we need to figure something out about this because it's delaying, the speech and educational patterns because of the young kids wearing the mask. They can't see how to enunciate, and it's having an
mm,
impact on the growth and development of the young people when they're
mm,
and I even some teachers say that they could emotionally have a um uh I don't know, a block defect. I can't think of the right word right now, but it could delay and stunt the a child's growth. And I see your product as being a way to kind of solve that issue and problem. And that's why
mm,
I really loved what you're doing with the sponsor a teacher campaign. But tell me
mm.
about that sponsor a teacher campaign a little bit, and what you foresaw when you guys first launched it.
I'll be very happy to share that. So, Sponsored Teacher was basically a campaign we set up last year, and the goal was to basically equip teachers around the world with a wearable air purifier. Now, Terrell, I know you've actually gotten one of those, and then
Yes,
you've been
yes.
wearing
Hold
it
on.
around. Yeah, yes, it's a collar that has basically UVC lights in there and an air filter, and it literally filters the air that you breathe. So the way it does is that it takes air from underneath, and then the clean air is what you breathe on top, and then you have a face shield as well if you're in a more unsecure or unsafe location.
Yeah,
So it's
and before she goes into explanation, for all of those who are wondering what it is, you've probably seen me wear it at different events or trade shows, and people were like, "What is that thing?" So one time somebody thought like my neck was broken or something. My neck isn't broken, guys. It's a air purifier because I have no idea sometimes the spaces I was going into during COVID-19, and I wanted to speak freely without the mask on, and this allowed me to do that. So go ahead. I had to tell him that real quick. Go ahead, tell him more about
yeah.
it.
So So a few words about that. So basically, the continued COVID-19 outbreaks, alongside new virus mutations, and with the rising number of cases, it showed that children and educators remain the most vulnerable, obviously, and obviously our essential workers to COVID-19, especially while remaining close contact with contact quarters such as classrooms. And a lot of classrooms actually they can't open the windows. We had situations, especially here in California, where they had to turn off the air conditioning, which, as you know, that is really, really, really uncomfortable, and leave
Mhm,
doors open. That was like how they were getting fresh air. In order to update HVAC, it costs a lot of money, and the replacement of even using UVC technology, which HVAC can be pretty tricky, make knowing when you have to replace it. I remember talking to a contractor, and he basically was a contractor building pharmacies around the state, and he said, look, that the biggest issue for him is like if he installs the light, is even getting back there to uninstall it, which is one of the things where we were big on education and advocating for innovation in this space, so that there could be more innovative what's it called products that could be used in conjunction with HVAC facilities, which is the standard way air is circulated in buildings
mhm,
in this country. Now, one of the things that was a concern for us was teacher safety, because, as you know, kids had to stay home and they had to study basically study at home. Now, with working parents who are getting used to being in close quarters with themselves, together with several kids, getting that adequate education, that social emotional interaction that you were talking about
mhm,
earlier, which it can be very detrimental to learning when you, especially when you have in California, as we have, dual immersion students. And one of the things I realized was that dual immersion classes, the way they teach, they must use hand gestures, mouth gestures, and
mhm,
and all these things, enunciate, and the child must see that to learn. Same thing with learning English; they must see all these things, how the mouth is moving, the tongue, all of that, to learn. So kids, students really suffered during this time, and
mhm,
a lot of teachers decided to resign because they were scared. Like, they didn't feel that the school districts were literally protecting them or taking charge of the situation, and it
mhm.
wasn't their fault. They just didn't know what to do. I remember speaking to someone I met actually at one of Village Up events, who was a
Nice.
COVID consultant. And
Yeah.
in my mind, I assumed that she would automatically know about our technology, but she didn't. She said, "No, I'm literally only helping schools understand what the CDC is saying, what the government, the central government is, federal government is saying, and then passing it on so that they can implement, strategy and policies within the school." And I thought, what? So
Mhm,
you're not there to find a solution. You're there to just transmit information. And
mhm,
that kind of bothered me as well. Then there were no budgets that were earmarked specifically for fixing the problem, right? Or
mhm,
proactively working on how do we ensure that if another outbreak of some kind happens, we are going to be all right. And this was very shocking for us, especially as one of us was an educator, and she
mhm,
also still has. I mean, my daughter's homeschooled, so I didn't really have much of worry about her going back to school. But one of us, they still had school kids, and they had to go back to college. They still had one had to go back to high school, and this was a major, major issue. So the thing is that we shared the concern, and in order to do that, we launched that sponsor the teacher campaign. And what we wanted to do was create basically ambassadors, get 1,000 teachers to get these units and use them, report back to us, tell us, share their experience with it, and get the data that shows that, look, these teachers are not getting ill.
Mhm.
And the cool thing about those units, Terrell, is that
Yeah.
they don't just protect from COVID-19 and variants and things like that, which they have been tested in, independently tested in labs. It's also the flu. That is something we
Hey.
deal with every single year. So
Yeah.
during flu season, guess what? The teachers can keep wearing those units, right?
Hmm.
So it's essentially something that goes beyond just the pandemic. The pandemic highlighted the fact that the world shut down, the
Hmm.
whole world shut down. If there's already something available, right, that can alleviate the situation, why are we not using it? We went straight into vaccines. We went straight into what's it called, social distancing, which worked. We masking also worked, because if you notice, for the past 2 years, we didn't have colds. We didn't get
Hmm.
any of those kind of pathogenic diseases that you would
Hmm.
catch because we're touching surfaces everywhere that are not
Yeah.
being wiped, and all these things. We actually were, I believe, we're our healthiest. So why not continue that, right?
Hmm.
Why not make sure that that's something that we proactively work into our infrastructure? And that's where
Hmm.
we come in, because the thing about UVC is that there's so many multiple ways companies that have innovation that they can be applied to so much, like your buildings, it can apply to your car, it can be applied to a classroom, offices, right? Hospitals, which already use it to disinfect theaters and patient rooms. So we
Yeah.
decided that, look, this campaign. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, yeah, I going back to some of the earlier points you were saying about, especially that consultant,
Mhm.
matter of fact, I didn't even know they had COVID consultants going on, like just the disruption, and just her only or his only duty was to translate the information. And I remember during this time, because working in HR and labor unions and labor law, like th- it constantly changed from guidelines from
Mhm.
federal CDC, OSHA, and so forth. And sometimes they weren't always all on the same page of how we had to implement things. And I think a product like yours could have solved all those problems. It's like, all right, well, instead of changing our policy program, and the whole, having half of the staff work from home, and then getting computers and everything set up at the house, and then one set up here at the, like, like dual stations, so that we can
Mm,
rotate
mm,
between offices. Like, it almost could have been less expensive to order a whole bunch of these and
mm.
say, all right, you guys, you're gonna get
Oh
this to
my
work, and then the rest, we'll just transfer you to at home for
gosh.
those who can.
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. No, seriously, it's really funny. In fact, fortunately, the CDC actually took an active role in understanding how UVC could help. Like, well, they termed it ultraviolet germicidal irradiation, which is actually the process at which UVC actually disinfects either surface, air, or water. And they discovered that if you could put upper air, they put on their website, actually, upper room, what's it called, UVC tech to disinfect the air. However, if you look at how COVID is spread, right, or any kind of virus or anything, if someone expels it, it rises up first, but then it's
Hmm.
going to come down, which is why the surface cleaning, although it was great, but by the time it gets to the surfaces, it's already gone up mid-air, where we all breathe, and then down to wherever the surface is, right? So table, floor, doorway, or whatever. Then the
Hmm.
more variants that were coming out, we were discovering that some of them just linger,
Mm.
in midair. So it was, and that's scary, because that means someone that could have coughed or done something in a specific space, you walking past it, you're already messed up, right?
Oh man.
And then, yeah, and then you have HVAC that's circulating and cleaning the air. If they don't have the technology within the HVAC, for instance, HEPA technology is the top of the line, right? So
Hmm.
when it comes to air purification, there's residential, commercial, and then there's hospital grade. you
Yeah.
you want to be sticking to hospital grade. Minimal, you want to be doing commercial. Residential, and I'm sorry to say this, is a lot of what you're buying in the stores. right? Or what
Mhm.
you see on Amazon that, is under $100, something like that. So you
Yeah.
have to look out for certain things when you want a commercial grade air purifier. So that's them having at least a HEPA 13 filter in there, right? That's like heavy grade. Then when you now add UVC, you're not
Mhm.
leaning towards the hospital grade level of disinfection. So
Yeah.
again, we were seeing all these like products coming up into the market, and we were like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. Like there's no real education on how this thing works and if it's going to do that. Are they checking to see that they've all been independently tested against the SARS virus or a sister virus of it to make sure that it would be effective? So
Mhm.
there were so many things that were pretty how I put it, stressful. And I think eventually EPA even got on board to be like, look, they had to clamp down on lots of products and companies making claims,
Mm.
that it will get rid of the virus. And no, these products are there to mitigate the risk of people catching it and spreading it, right?
Mhm.
The virus. And that's something that was, pretty stressful. But in essence, wearing a mask was still the best way to protect yourself. You just had to make sure that the mask you're wearing, you disinfect it regularly, which a lot of people didn't realize. Masks also cause a high number of what's it called, waste again. So it was like this, some of these masks were not recyclable at all. And
Mhm.
that's why we prefer to focus on fabric masks. And fabric masks, we could wash them, put them in the laundry and everything. I mean, I had
Mhm.
like 12, so one for each day. And then if I wore makeup, I would wear like two or three in the same day. If not, a lot of people had mask acne. I mean, I suffered that, and I had to figure out like, okay, this is what I have to do to make sure I don't get mask acne. So there were quite
Mhm.
a lot of things that this pandemic showed us as a company. See, as a citizen of the world,
Mhm.
all you're thinking about is, I don't want to catch it, I don't want to get sick, all that. But as us in the life sciences space, we had to go further than that. We had
Yeah.
to think, what can we do to make sure this doesn't happen again? When the
Mhm.
dust settles, our hope is that at least companies like ourselves can come together and come, like, some kind of committee of some sort, to be able to advise governments, to be able to
Mhm.
advise policymakers that, hey, this thing happened. However, as you can see from our research, this is what we can do and implement in spaces. I mean, there parts of the world already uses technology. Like in
Yeah.
Asia, for instance, they implemented it immediately, right?
Mhm.
Because they're used to you know, a lot of pollution and stuff like that. So that they air purification is standard, right? But they went
Mhm.
beyond. They even had UVC, which was a safe UVC, that's 222 nm. They had UVC on doorways and things like that. They had, and one of the things hated the most when we could start going out was going to the mall,
Mhm.
because I did not want to touch the what's it called, the buttons in the lift. I did not want to touch the what's it called, the stuff, why did I forget
But
the
escalators?
escalator.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to touch the escalator. That was like the worst thing for me. And guess what? There's technology that disinfects the handles of escalators.
Oh man, I
you
didn't know
know
that either.
yeah, we actually had it on our list. We had a list
Uh-huh.
of products that could be used in high touch, areas that were like of
Uh-huh.
high risk, even bathrooms, public bathrooms, right? There's certain things that you can, like, UVC light that you can install that are sensor operated, that would come on when there's nobody in the room to disinfect quickly, and then
Mhm.
switch off when somebody comes into the room. There's so much going on in the space, right, Terrell,
Yeah.
that it can be frustrating, not just for us that are creating our own products that we already kind of like know what our market is, but for those who know that this would, the scientists especially, I mean, I feel for them, because a scientist can be satisfied just proving a theory. But
Yeah.
when you are living in a situation where you're like, hey, something that I've worked on or I've studied can help, and then it's not being used, it can be frustrating. I mean, when
Mhm.
people came to visit me in my home and they saw, like, oh, there's an air purifier, there's something on the doorway, there's this, we even had at the time a handle one that could disinfect the door handle.
Mhm.
And, they were like, aren't you guys going overboard? But guess what? No one in my family caught COVID. We didn't
Mhm.
have the flu. We still haven't gotten the flu or anything like that. We're
Yeah.
trying our best to protect ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So it's pretty how I put it, eye opening, for
Mhm.
us as a company to figure out how we would, in fact, it helped us a lot determining our strategy, how we'll
Mhm.
market, how we'll enter the market, what we will touch on. The charity gives us an ample opportunity to now truly educate, and not just
Mhm.
educate the West, educate everybody, because again, COVID didn't see it didn't see borders. It hit every single nation, and it would be quite exciting to see how far our collaborative effort goes with other charities that are actually on ground to
Hmm.
actually implement our tech, in so many spaces. One of the projects that we're looking forward to doing is in an estate where our tech is essentially going to see for the first time, collectively sanitizing water that's being used in houses.
Wow.
And yeah, I know, we're really excited about taking that on. Probably not this year, we'll probably start next year, but it's something that it's like I'm going back to into my past,
Mm,
right? I'm fixing something there.
mm,
I can't even explain how wonderful that feels. That's
mm,
something I didn't even realize was an issue until the first time I saw someone drinking water directly from a tap.
right,
Something that I never processed to think, oh, this is how we get water in the house, right?
right,
Then now I'm so focused on it because it affects multiple families, multiple households. No matter how rich you are, it's the same problem, right?
yeah,
And it's now something that our company, with me, myself, and our co-founders are about to find a solution for. So
right.
it's been a long road.
But I mean,
We're
it's been a long
self-funded.
road, and it's a much needed
Yeah,
road,
it was a much
and
needed road.
and you know the toughest part is something that you explained is like
Mm.
just the patents and I want to get
Oh
into
yeah.
that just for a little bit, but going back to this little device, one thing I did just to double back, think about like
Oh, you
this
got it.
portable like
Rest-
air purifier here. I was remembering there was a time when you were speaking like and thinking back, even just here within within San Diego, there was a time when there was people who couldn't or didn't want to get the vaccination, right? Because for whatever
Mhm,
reasons, right,
mhm.
whether it be health, religion, just didn't trust it. This could have been a great alternative solution. Like,
Yeah.
okay, all right, you can't or unable to get the vaccine. Okay, here's another solution, right, for you. And you don't and let's say if you don't want to wear the mask, you want to, and for whatever reason don't want to wear a mask for whatever reason, this could be another viable solution, right, for that. Now going fast forward to what we were talking about with you know building new solutions, because I feel like this is the water problem that you're about to fix as well is
Mhm,
not even the that's not because in DC, my parents live in DC. That sometimes they'll get these alerts that happen where say, "Hey, you cannot drink the tap water right now," or please boil the water before you use it or
mm,
drink it because something happened to like a pipeline or whatever.
mhm.
So even in developed
Wow.
worlds, this is still
Mm.
like an issue that happens from time to time. I mean, even think about the city of, was it Detroit or where was it, Michigan?
Is Detroit, yeah.
Yeah,
And yeah,
the water issue they had with their pipes,
and
those
Flint,
those
Michigan.
yeah, Flint, right? A developed country, right? And had that issue. But I feel like the biggest thing that we have, as we noticed in one of our episodes, is developing, you know, these products, and which takes some time, and then there's a patent process to it. And
Mm, mm,
one of our highest episodes that we listened to or that we did was a gentleman that talked about his patent process, and it seemed like there was a lot of people interested in it because we've had so many black inventions and inventors throughout our time in society. Some of them haven't gotten the credit due, and have not owned their patents because another company has bought it for to hold on to it because that's where the money, the profit, and everything else is. And you've been navigating this process. I know it hasn't been easy and it's been a long process, but how has that process been for you, giving us the nutshell of it? Because I don't think we can
mm.
cover it all in this episode, but here's a shameless plug. We are going to do a webinar around this because
Yeah.
we realize that this is something that a lot of people want to talk about. You know, why is a patent important to black founders or people of color? And how did you get into the process of understanding and navigating
Mm.
that process? Just give them a little
Yeah.
bit. We don't want to give them the whole webinar right now, but just give them a little bit of your
No,
story.
no, no, we wouldn't. But what I want to address two things you said prior before jumping to the pattern. So the first thing with the units, you're correct about the fact that it could have solved the problem for people who couldn't, and in some cases medically some people couldn't actually get the vaccine.
Right.
And we actually know one person in our circle that had some health issues that would have made it difficult for her if she actually took the vaccine. It could actually make her sicker. And but you will be surprised that it is community leaders who were thoughtful that actually had a budget for dealing with the customers or their congregation or whatever when it came to COVID-19. In fact, an organization that, as you know, we're working with, we're focused on getting those wearables for their older population,
Mm-hmm.
which was very interesting. Then they also wanted products that could help with their like, for instance, a congregation, and then within the church, right? And that was something that was very fascinating for us. That, hey, that's interesting. Community organizations are the leaders in proactively wanting to do something, because
Mm-hmm.
all those spaces are needed for a reason. They're needed to keep people balanced, right?
Yeah.
Mentally, spiritually, and all of that. And if those all the spaces were closed, so people didn't have human contact, physical contact, things like that. Same
Mm-hmm.
thing with old people's homes, and and stuff like that. These are things
Mm-hmm.
that could have been used to avoid many, basically passing, and that they didn't just have to, before we figured out what was going on. Then
Yeah.
on the other side, that's one area. The second side of something that you had spoken about was about access to clean water. There are 2 million Americans that live without basic access to safe drinking water and sanitation
Mm.
still, right?
Mm.
That's a market. But the other market as well is the area where, when there, as you said, natural disasters or something happens and they send your parents like a notice, right? What then happens? Like, what water are they going to use? Are you going to go to the store and keep buying water, or are you going to, for in those emergency situations, have some kind of facility or something in your home that allows you to still have water, until whatever the state or the city decides to do to fix the actual problem.
Mm-hmm.
So these are things that we have actually looked at doing our research
Mm-hmm.
and over time. And it's been very exciting. And being in stealth mode, I feel, helps a lot, especially in the patent process. And I'm going to talk
Mm-hmm.
about that. So deciding to get a patent wasn't difficult. We were fortunate in one of the events I had attended to meet somebody who had worked for NASA. And she actually, I think you know her, Janae Griffin. And then she had spoken about patents. So I've been trying to, and because of what she talked about, me, I'm a geek. I decided to go dive into the history of patents and Black people, and
Mm-hmm.
realize that a lot of inventions that we use today around the world, a lot of it started with some of us, especially with slavery. That a lot of them came here with ideas on how to do their work easier, and stuff like that. And these are things that a lot of them had to give up their patent as part of their freedom.
Mm.
And you still have generations of families benefiting from this, but the people who made this product, designed it, the basic designs of these products that have now become, are now on steroids now with tech, and engineering, and there's no benefit. And this is an issue with, you know our history with slavery. In essence, the descendants of slaves have not really been educated on a lot of things of society, on how society gains wealth. We've had to learn all these things on our own. And now diversity is a way for the whole world to now see that, hey, hang on, a lot of what you're benefiting from actually came from someone else that didn't look like you. They saw an issue that you weren't seeing, because of, they saw it in a different lens, and then they figured out a way to do it because there was a way they were doing it back home. And these are
Mm-hmm.
and that's for me the basis. And when all this the patent thing is, a typical household, right, in the West, automatically knows when you come up with an idea, the first thing someone in that house is telling you, you need to get a patent. It's not the same in our community, right? So for us, it was a situation where we're fortunate to be I was fortunate to be on an event. I took that on. The moment the three of us sat down and said, "Oh, we want to solve this problem," and in our research, we came up with an invention, and we saw that it was going to be viable. Oh, and that's another story. But again, we'll talk about that
Mm-hmm.
in the webinar. We were like, no, we got to get a patent. Now, I'm so grateful for one of our co-founders who, I had to assign patents to her because she's like military style organized, right? And when you're working on something like this, there's so multiple parties, you need to be able to manage them all to keep moving forward. See, that's
Mm-hmm.
another issue. The timelines, the steps to get a patent. It's very easy if you're not being encouraged all the way to complete it. Some
Mm-hmm.
people actually fortunately have patents. I mean, we met a few people like that, in our Sheba Venture Partners, and the problem they had was money.
Mm-hmm.
So some of them had even like literally given equity out of getting released equity from their patents, but the money wasn't enough. See, that
Mm-hmm.
lack of education of actually understanding the cost is going to take you from your idea to actually getting it made, the prototype made, to commercializing it. A lot of people
Mm-hmm.
are not aware of that.
Yeah.
And every time you borrow or you look for an investor to come into the picture, you're losing equity. See,
Mm-hmm.
equity is so 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 important. Every
Mm-hmm.
time you let go of equity, you lose your decision making power. Every single
Mm-hmm.
time.
Yeah.
So it's something that I believe, like in our community, that when it comes to wealth building, entrepreneurship is key. Also, patents, right? IP
Mm-hmm.
is key. There's a lot of ideas being given away for free that could essentially generate income for people,
Yeah.
which has been essentially, what has happened to the other side, of the world that has benefited from that.
Mm-hmm.
And there transference of knowledge. See, this is when people say knowledge transfer. It's a big thing in the patent world, but really in how people of African descent have come to be in the Western world.
Mm-hmm.
Transference of knowledge has only been when someone from the other side decides that this is not fair. I'm going to teach you how to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Now, passing that on sometimes is difficult because a lot of it is received with skepticism in
Mm-hmm.
our community. I remember when we started our journey, we are so grateful we had the best possible mentor slash advisor.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that, Shola, no matter whatever anyone ever tells you that you can't do this, don't choke. Because she was the one that, sometimes we will have those moments that is this going to really happen? She's like, no, it will happen. She was the one that even carried us and encouraged us unto the point that we were able to make our first breadboard prototype.
Mm-hmm.
And you would not believe that there were people around us, who are actually engineers that still didn't see the value at that point. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when you're giving the vision, it's not for everybody else. It's for you to see it through
Mm-hmm.
because, God knows you're the only one that can do it.
Yeah.
So we have been moving steadily, slowly. We decided that we weren't going to bring anybody on board eventually early because we didn't want to lose our equity. We
Mm-hmm.
got rid of people who were not valuable to the company. And then we stayed in our trio and then self-funded. So everything you see with
Nice.
Hygear is literally paid for by three women, split
I love it.
evenly, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and then now we're registered in England, we're registered in the US, we're getting our charity registered. We were in the process of registering in Canada last year, but we decided to hold off on that until we have our charity set up. Because one great thing about a charity is you can now partner with others,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you can now, they're on ground already. And then they can basically tell you about the terrain and what is needed, as opposed to you just reading information. You can now talk to them because they have data, they've done research, you can now utilize, which has been really helpful. It's actually been a lot of charity data that we've been using
Mm-hmm.
in terms of our research and questionnaires. Asking, I
Yeah.
mean, with teachers, we had a questionnaire that we had sent out. We had heavy requests for the units from third world countries
Yeah. That,
because they weren't getting vaccines.
yeah. And no wonder you were getting heavy requests because there was no other solution out there. And
Mhm,
and yeah, so
mhm.
now people know the story behind Shola's venture, High Gear, and we could probably keep going in this interview, but
Oh yeah.
we have to keep it short. Well, we don't have to keep it short, but I like to keep it in that drive time. And plus, I want us to really drop that. Hey, we are coming back for a webinar, and what are we going to do in this webinar, Shola? Tell them what we're going to do in this webinar that we're going to drop.
So this webinar series is focused on IP, patents, and obviously monetizing them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about building wealth, generational wealth with this. Because think about it, if a head of a family or someone in your family has a pattern, they can literally put the earnings in a trust that can essentially feed your family for generations. And a lot of people don't understand this. If you don't understand how money works, obviously, if you don't understand how patents work, you wouldn't be able to figure out how to commercialize or monetize it, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to invite, not just me, we'll be talking, we're going to invite other founders that have
Mhm.
patents or are working on them and have technology that will help the world in the future, for them to talk about their journeys, because we want you to see that it's not impossible. For
Yeah.
instance, three women doing this, working, and now we now have two patents at the USPTO non-provisional phase, working on it consistently for 3 years. We
Mhm.
need to explain the timeline so you are prepared, right? Just like how you start a business, right, on the side, and then make sure that the business covers your salary before you switch. It's the same thing with a patent, right? It takes time. You're going to need a couple of years. You're going to
Mhm.
need to know how to do the research. We've been like very fortunate in our company to have the right people give us the right resources. For instance, in the US here, we got a lot of help from Village Up. They've been very supportive. In fact, we just got our first grant
Mhm.
thanks to
Nice.
their help, where they got connected to an organization that basically gave us a grant. And that's one of the kind of things you need. You've got SBDC, you got the SBA there, you've got PTAC that can support you in this entire process. And for us in the UK, we were very fortunate to have, we did an accelerator with London and Partners first, but then we connected with an economic advisor in the East Midlands, the National
Mhm.
District Council, and he literally, he plugged us in. Like, we had access to so much, to the point where something we had been trying to do for 2 years, we literally found a partner to take us to the next level. And now, in the next 6 to 8 months, we're looking at having a product that's going to be in the market.
Mhm.
So I think a lot about this space is about information sharing and collaborating. And we need to stop thinking that, about hoarding stuff, right? Like, I'm not here to sit down and say I'm going to be consulted to somebody or whatever. For me, the biggest problem I saw in our space when it comes to patents was fabrication.
Mhm.
When you go to a fabrication house, when they see where you're at, you could be put at you could put your patent at risk. You need
Mhm.
to be able to figure out how to make sure that doesn't happen. That's what something we learned, and that we're hoping to pass on in the webinar. There
All
are
right,
other
don't give
people
them
who
too
are
much.
in
Don't give
the
them too much. Let's save it for the webinar. Let's save
yes,
it for the webinar. So here's what we're going
true,
to do,
true,
ladies
true,
and
true,
gentlemen.
true.
This is what we're going to do. We're going to when this episode, by the time this episode releases, I'm going to have a little link that will allow people to sign up to get notified for the
Good.
webinar, and then we'll shoot you an email when we get this series together. And get you the information you need to learn how to do everything that Shola's talking about. And you get to learn about some other founders' journey in that process as well too. So let's leave it there for
Yay.
now. Because there's so much more to talk in reference to this. I even remember the time that me and you were talking at one time about all the patents that Apple owns and how they're making money off of it. Some of them that they bought and finessed out of other founders. Some of them which are black founders to give you guys a heads up. But we'll talk about all that in the future episode. If people want to connect with Hygear right now, give them in 1 minute or less, like how they can connect with you and Hygear right now.
Okay, so you can go on our website, which is www.myhygear.com, spelled Hygear. And you can go on Instagram, Facebook, no, sorry, not Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And you can join us there. LinkedIn is the best place because we tend to put more announcements there. Instagram, we tend to put, short videos and things like that. And we're going to have webinars coming up soon to talk more about, hygiene tech.
Right.
So yeah, so that's the best way to find us. Thank you guys for
Awesome. So
listening.
make sure you connect with Hygear, get more hygiene, highly visionary products to your town and your area. And we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much, sis, as always, for everything you do and what you're doing for the global community. We appreciate you.
Thank you, brother. It's always a pleasure.